Hi, everybody. It's Jim Knight. I'm interviewing myself today. Well, not really, but what I am going to do is, rather than do our usual coaching conversations, is respond to questions that you've been sending me. I'm excited to do my best to respond. And if you're watching live and you want to put a question in the chat, we have people queued up, ready to send the questions to me so I can respond. And I'd love this to be more conversational than just me talking. So the responses that you could send me would be wonderful. Since I don't have someone to talk to, I've got pictures of my family instead. So here's Luke hanging out here in this picture. And then this is one of Jenny, me. This is when she crossed the finish line at the Ironman. So it's like my prized photo, one of the best days of my life, in part because I didn't have to do the Ironman. She did. But I got to watch it, and it was a proud and wonderful moment. At any rate, they're my audience, and you are virtually, so I'm glad you're here. And what I want to talk about today is these questions you've given me. I'm just doing a quick response here, there. And I'm going to work my way through, and feel free to ask me to elaborate or go deeper, or if there's something you're not clear on. And I really think the questions I received, I can't address all of them, but they really cut to the situation we're in right now, which is pretty unprecedented. Unprecedented now has become kind of a cliche. Of course, it's unprecedented, but what does that mean? Well, first off, it's an uncertain time because of COVID-19. COVID-19, we don't know if our kids are going back to school. We did a focus groups last week with 25 coaches in 5 different sessions from across the United States and Canada. And what we found was basically everybody was saying, you know, everything changed since last week, and this is what we're going to do next week, and October 8th, it might all change. And there's a whole bunch of uncertainty about what we do as professionals, what it means for our children. And uncertainty that isn't going away right away. You know, we look ahead and we're like, are we stuck with this for 3 months? For a year? How long? And so that's one thing. Second thing, and this is actually a good thing, but there's an awakening to the need for attacking systemic racism. And the country is, I hope, becoming awake to the fact that we need to change. That's why this year at our coaching conference, Teaching, Learning, Coaching, Equity is a huge theme. Ibram X. Kendi, Zuraidah Hammond, Floyd Cobb and John Cranapple, and a whole host of people are going to be talking about the issues related to equity. So that's a second unpredictable thing. Unpredictable in a good way, but still a little unsettling, because we're recognizing that what we do has to change. So it's another reason for change. And then the third thing is that we're in a time where our president has chosen divide and conquer as a strategy for re-election. And what that does is it divides people intentionally, but it means that we find ourselves divided from our friends. I worked with someone for since 1992, and because of a comment that she made online, and my response, which I tried to do graciously with love, but nonetheless truthfully, she, I believe, has blocked me. And people have it with family members, their parents, their brothers and sisters. There's this incredible division in the country. And any one of those things would be unsettling. But to be addressing 3 at the same time, these are incredible times. And so it's not surprising that people would have good questions to ask. So I'd like to do my best to answer your questions. In some of the areas you've asked for comments, I don't have expertise. I'll give you a couple thoughts, but I think it's important to look up people who truly are experts, and say, for example, trauma. And I'll just try to respond. And what I really want to say is that I do think there's hope, and I think coaches are absolutely vitally essential right now. And so I want to talk about some of these things. The first question is, what are the key factors in supporting instructional coaching virtually? And I believe that they're the same factors for instructional coaching non-virtually. And I was thinking about putting a slide up so you could see this slide, but I thought it'd be better if we could just sort of avoid watching slides and just see a conversation today. But trying to adjust this. Okay, anyway. So there are four things. And so if you could visualize four circles, like a Venn diagram, since this is education, we need to have at least a reference to a Venn diagram, and four overlapping circles. And these four things, they look a little different for virtual coaching than regular coaching, but I want to talk about these four things. So the first thing is a way of being. I refer to that as the partnership approach. But what do we mean by this way of being? What I mean is, this is how it all came to be. I interviewed hundreds of teachers about professional development. I could see professional development wasn't very successful back when I started to do this research, and I wanted to figure out what do we need to do to make it more successful. So I interviewed hundreds of teachers. What I heard from teachers was, we learn the most from other teachers. So I thought, well, then let's have a teacher be the professional developer. And initially, the person was called a learning consultant, and then we switched to instructional collaborator, and then we tweaked it and made it instructional coach around about 2003. And so what that means is, if you work from the partnership principles, and there are 8 blogs on the Radical Learners blog describing each of those principles. But at the heart of it, what happens is when you talk to a teacher, it should feel no different than the conversations you had with teachers before you became a coach. There should be the same kind of respectful interaction, the same kind of tentativeness in the way you interact with the person. Sort of caution about the way you share ideas, and respect, and a desire to go back and forth, and an acknowledgement of the expertise of the teacher. And so you need a way of being. Now, maybe you think there's a different way of being other than the partnership approach. But I would say our study showed that when we took the partnership approach versus a more directive fidelity approach, that coaches were 4.5 times more likely to plan to implement what we did when we took the partnership approach. And it's pretty consistent with the research on, say, motivation from DC and Ryan and so forth. However, you're going to do what works for you. But what I would say is you need to have a set of beliefs, a philosophy, a way of interacting with people, a way of being that drives what you do. Second thing is a process. And so again, if you look on the Radical Learners blog, there are tons of articles related to the process we follow, which is the impact cycle. There's a book called The Impact Cycle, which goes into quite a bit of detail, but on the blog, you can find a lot. And if you go to our website, instructionalcoaching.com, you can find links in the resources section that show you the whole coaching cycle in elementary and secondary, videos and checklists, over 100 forms you can download. So there are a lot of free resources to get the process. And if you don't use that process, you need some other process. You take a more facilitative approach to coaching, where you're not doing instructional coaching, you're more just having a coaching conversation, where you're helping the person sort of explore goals and make a plan. You may want to look up the growth coaching model. Our distance learning workshop uses the growth coaching model as our model for what we do. And basically what you do in growth coaching is you say, okay, let's talk about what your goal is. Okay, let's talk about the resources that exist in reality. Let's make a list of options. Okay, which one of these options will you do? Which one gives you the most energy or the most confidence? All right, let's develop the tactics. When's it going to happen and what do you have to do? And then what's the habit? How do you make this a habit? What do you remove from your life to make sure there's room for you to actually make this happen? So goals, reality, options, will, tactics, and habits. And that's the growth model. There are other models. You could use the grow model, Sir John Whitmore's grow model, but you need a process for structuring your conversation. Third thing is communication and skills. Um, how do you interact as a coach? And there are a number of skills that I think are really, really important. I'll emphasize just a few things I've been mentioning recently that come from Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is a book I love. He says that the conditions for dialogue are humility, faith, and love. Humility means I am open to being changed by what you have to say, and I'm embracing the opportunity to learn from you. Doesn't mean we have low self-esteem. It just means we're open to learning more. We recognize the limitations of what we do. And when we're talking about instruction these days, a humble approach is the only honest approach, because we're learning at such an accelerated pace. There are no proven answers for a lot of the things we're facing. But when you're humble, what you're communicating to your coaching partner is, I really welcome your ideas. I want to learn from you. Faith is communicating that I believe in you. I think you can do this. And I see your strengths. I value you. The people that change your life are often ones who see things in you that you didn't even know were there. And so faith is seeing the strengths of the other person, communicating that I believe in you. And love, for lack of better terms, I say that because love is such a widely used and sometimes trivialized word. But in this case, I think what it means is that my will is engaged for the good of the other person, as Dallas Willard says. I genuinely want what's good for you. And when someone can tell in the way we interact that we want to hear their opinion, we believe in them, we see their strengths, we value them as people, and we want what's best for them, truly, then they'll trust us. And if one of those things is missing, they're going to have a hard time trusting us. So that's a critical part about communication, and a critical part about the way we interact, to communicate, to affirm and not judge, and to truly see the good, and for people to feel, wow, this person really does want what's best for me, and they are really putting me ahead of them. And that's manifested in the way we listen. And as someone, I couldn't find her name, I was looking it up. I use it in my writing, but I still couldn't find it. What the world needs right now is a good listening to. We really need to be like ninja listeners. A lot of the questions we've got here are ones that my first response would be, have we let go of the need to try to solve the person's problem, and are we just going to listen to what they have to say? And then asking good questions, but not asking leading questions, asking questions that genuinely promote reflective dialogue. Those are some of the coaching skills. Christian van Nuremberg talks about noticing, just paying attention to the conversation. That's probably easier face-to-face than it is in a virtual realm, but even in the virtual realm, you can see a lot on facial expression about how the person's responding to what you're saying. And you want to get to a place where you're in alignment. If you're trying to talk that other person into something, it's probably not going to succeed. It's really about helping them unleash their potential, as a number of people have said. The last circle is strategic knowledge. And I'm going to talk more about that, but that is that you need to have tools to help people succeed. Sometimes that means you gather data, but virtually probably it's going to be more about you're helping people figure out how to plan their daily lessons, how to plan offline learning, what technology to use, and I'll talk about some resources that exist for all of that. So that's the first question. The key factors in my mind are the way of being, the process for communication, the communication skills and habits and beliefs, and then strategic knowledge. You have tools to share. When we did a study years ago in Florida, when Just Read Florida was flourishing in Florida, we started with 2,000 coaches and narrowed it down to 5 coaches who are really doing a great job. And what we heard in our interviews was that the coaches that people were really grateful for had powerful tools to share. That's the strategic knowledge. we're going to have tools to share. Second question, and just so you know, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 27 questions. No, just 8, sorry. Second question. I thought it was funny. How can coaches support teachers who seem overly stressed? I feel like we can't just chug along with our plans for professional development that we had in place before the pandemic. So I think the first thing is your question is, how can I help? You need to think through, what is it I can, as cliche as it sounds, what is it I can share that's going to be helpful? And one thing is the strategic knowledge, which I'm going to talk about later, that fourth circle, that we have tools that really help people do their job. I think that's really, really going to be important. Second thing is to work at empathy. And this is where that quote, sometimes people just need a good listening to genuinely communicate empathy. And I'll define empathy this way. It's understanding the person's emotions, and it's understanding their needs, and then acting on those things. So emotions is what they're feeling, but needs underlying it is really important. And this will be problematic because people are dealing with stuff, and the way they express what they need might not come out as a gentle and kind and loving conversation. But to truly be there for people, we need to understand both their emotions and their feelings and their needs. Understand what they're going through emotionally and what they need. And that means we have to really listen. We really have to take it in. We have to ask ourselves, as we're listening, what does I think this person needs? Also have to ask them. I have a few books I wanted to share about this. First off, a listening book. My favorite one right now is You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. This is a really great book about listening. If you want to be a ninja listener, this would be a great one. Then a really great book about looking at the power dynamics of conversation and getting away from violent communication, which is trying to tell people, control people, and so forth. It's this really magnificent book, Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication. I think it's fantastic. And then if you're, and we'll come back to this as we talk about other questions, but what about yourself? How do you demonstrate empathy towards yourself? How do you do that? So this book is one worth looking at, Kristen Neff's book on self-compassion. In a nutshell, she says, we are harder on ourselves than we would be on anybody else. And we need to treat ourselves with the same compassion that we would show towards a good friend of ours who's going through stuff. Even she recommends just one little thing, writing ourselves a compassionate letter to say, I understand your situation, demonstrating compassion, moving away from self-criticism to self-compassion. A lot of people are really hindered in their capacity to succeed at what they do and to be forces for good because they're self-critical versus self-compassionate. It might sound, I don't know if I'm fully expressing how important it is, but just to be aware of self-criticism is a big step forward. And to say, am I talking about myself in my head in ways I would never talk about another person? Because I should treat myself at least as well as I would treat other people. And then I can't help but share one of my books. This book, Better Conversations, I think it's a book for the time. As people try to look at how to work with other people, work through all the challenges we're facing. Relationships are critical, and this is a book about how to build emotionally positive relationships, life-giving conversations, a set of beliefs and habits. Now, if you don't want to buy the book, there are maybe not dozens, but at least 10 videos online about better conversations. There are tons of tools. If you just go to Radical Learners and you poke around a bit, you'll see a lot of videos around better conversation. Okay. I'm worried, this is question number 3. I'm worried that if I am told to take guided reading groups instead of doing my normal coaching, that I'll be seen as more of a guided reading teacher than someone the teachers come to for support, and it'll be harder for me to bounce back into my coaching position when we're out of the pandemic. So, first off, I think to be a coach right now is to have an incredibly important job. I mean, people's learning needs are at the all-time high. Well, maybe not the all-time high. Maybe that was April 1st. But still, they're really high. There's so much for people to learn. Even if there's people have worked all summer creating materials, it's still implementation. And so people need help, and they're going to need you as a coach. And so I think to make the case that people need coaches is really, really critical. And that means you need to be sharing powerful tools. You're helping people do their job. It needs to be clear within the culture of the organization. But wow, this person gave me some stuff I could use that was really helpful. The second thing is I think we're going to have to look at a broader definition of what a coach does. It's not just coaching. And so I talk about 3 different categories: mentoring, training, and coaching. And I may change these terms, but that's the ones I've got right now in the book I'm writing. So mentoring is when you respond to a person's felt need. They come to you and they say, can you show me how to do Flipgrid? Now, someone comes to you and says, can you show me how to do Flipgrid? I'm going to get this right. They don't want you to say, well, other times you've been trying to learn how to use different kinds of software and apps. How have you learned that? They want you to show them how to use Flipgrid. And in that moment, that's what I would call short-term mentoring. The person comes to you with a problem, you solve the problem. A second thing is you're going to have people who need long-term support, where what you're doing is you're responding to their challenges. Courtney Teague is kind of a mentor for me right now, and she's a expert on technology, and she's helped me figure out how to use a lot of different apps, and she's co-presented with me. And I just go to her and say, Courtney, how can I assess the level of engagement? What's an app you've got for that? Or how can I create a word map right at the start to get a sense of how people are doing? And she's got ideas and she solves it, and she really functions like a mentor. And we've been meeting now since about April, and she's helped me with my courses, and she functions in the kind of mentor role. Sometimes you'll be a trainer. And so you'll be doing like a 30-minute or 60-minute training or longer on, I think 90 minutes is kind of our max. But on like how to use Padlet or how to use some kind of Google app. And that's just training. Let me just do this thing. You might even record it and send it as a video, but you're providing information. So there's mentoring, there's training, and then coaching is a goal-directed activity. And so coaching could be the impact cycle, it could be the grow or growth model, it could be other kinds of models, but we're helping people set and hit goals. Now, it may be during this time that we set shorter goals, quicker goals, and we're in a quicker iteration. I was coached last week by a colleague of mine. She happens to live in Switzerland, and I'm working with their school. And it became clear that my goal was around engagement, and I had to figure out how I'm going to assess the level of engagement, what I'm going to do differently to measure engagement. And I decided that my goal would be that most people on a Likert scale about their level of engagement would be 4s and 5s on a scale of 1 to 5. But we hit that goal pretty quickly. So now I'm like, well, I need to get a better measure of achievement. How can I measure achievement? And how do I know if they're actually learning the content? And so that's the next thing, to try to figure out how do we measure achievement. I don't know if I'll do it next week or the week after, but that's what's coming. And I want about 95% mastery of the content. So you may have that kind of situation, a quicker kind of engagement. So I think you have to sum up my answer, you have to provide powerful support to teachers to let the school know how important coaching is, because it's never been more important than right now. And You need to, you can do that by sometimes being a coach, sometimes being a trainer, sometimes being a mentor, and there's blurred lines there. Some of coaching is about helping people learn activities, and same with mentoring. Next question. What strategies do you have for a coach's self-care and well-being? We've been working hard since March without much of a break to support teachers and continue to support them during this trying time. How can we take care of ourselves? Well, I have a whole bunch of ideas about this, in part because that's exactly what I've been writing about for the last few weeks. And also, I've been working on it. I've been trying to figure out my own self-care, how to take care of myself, how to be healthy, and there's a number of things I've been doing to try to do that. So maybe I'll talk about those briefly. One thing is, I think it's worth considering looking at the books that have been written about habits. Now, one person I'm going to interview on here sometime this year is Wendy Wood, who wrote a really wonderful book called Good Habits, Bad Habits. And that's my favorite book. It's evidence-based. There are many other ones. There's Atomic Habits is one that's popular. Charles Duhigg's book on the power of habit. B.J. Fogg's book on habits. These are all good books about habits, but the idea of a habit is essentially that you figure out a trigger that triggers you to do something, like a signal light. When the signal light turns green, we go. And then we do the thing, and then there's some kind of reward. And there's a whole bunch of stuff around habits. I can't summarize it all here, but you create a context where it's more likely you can do the habit. You make the habit really easy to do. By creating a context, it's going to be hard for me to have a healthy diet if I'm working at the donut shop. And so if I want to have a healthy diet, I have to kind of eliminate things in my house that are going to be tempting and take me off my thing. You want to do routine. And so if you say, I'm going to go running, or in my case, it's biking right now, I'm going to do it at the same time every day. And I want to do repetition. And one of the things that Wendy Wood says is it takes about 90 repetitions to make it a habit. She says you keep doing it until you're not doing it anymore. Kind of like brushing your teeth. You don't have to remind yourself to brush your teeth. You just do it. So what are some things you could make a habit? Well, one of them would be sleep. I'm convinced, I've been using this little app called Pillow, and I'm convinced that sleep is absolutely essential to get enough sleep. Because I'm monitoring it. And when I get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, which might seem impossible. If you have toddlers, you're like, dude, how am I supposed to do that? But at any rate, just do the best you can. But more sleep you'll be happier and more productive. And it's critical. And I read a couple books on sleep. And one of the authors, I think his name's Sean Salazar, Sean Stevenson, I think. He said, you'll never have the body you want, the life you want. I'm not too worried about my body, but except for being healthy. But he said, unless you get enough sleep. And everything, your cognitive ability, your positive attitude, it's all about sleep. The second concept is space. And so that might be time by yourself, going for a walk somewhere. It might be some kind of retreat where you can get away. I have a deal with my partner, Jenny, where each of us gets a weekend retreat. And we go away on our own quietly for 3 days. And we reflect on what matters. No one there, no technology. And we read the books we want to read to help us just pause and think about our lives. During the 3 days when Jenny's away, I'm responsible for everything at home, and vice versa. But it could just be retreat for a couple hours. It could be a pathway you're going to walk on. It could be getting up really early in the morning. That's going to be a challenge with sleep, but nonetheless. But putting space into your life, some time to pause and reflect. But also putting space into your calendar. Making sure that you're not rushing. Hurry. The need to get from one place to the other. I argue that the metaphor that we use too often for life is surfing. We surf books, we surf the internet, we surf TV channels, we even surf relationships. And a fulfilling life is a deep life. And to have a deep life, you need space. You need margin. You need a chance to pause between one activity and the next. So don't just pile one activity on top of the next, on top of the next. Certainly, once you've chosen a job to work in an organization, there are some things that are beyond your control. But the more you can make a priority to build space in, the better it is. And then, there's things we all know and talk about. Diet. Michael Pollan's rules: eat mostly vegetables. Let's see if I can get it right. Real food, not too much. And so diet is going to have an effect. If you're feeling stressed out and traumatized, the temptation might be to really go after your New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, but that'll just add to the problem in the long run. And so to be careful about how you consume things. Now, you can't do all of this at once. You just pick one thing, and the easiest thing is probably sleep. Also, exercise. If you can build a habit of exercise, it's going to be more. I know that if I get enough sleep and I exercise in the morning, my day is going to be markedly better than when I don't do those things. And so to do those, that's why habit becomes really important. Connection with other people, finding different ways to connect. Maybe you set up some kind of structured conversation with other coaches. Maybe it's family members you meet on Zoom. But having other people to connect with is a really, really key thing. And one thing you might want to do around self-care is to look at an interview I did about a month ago with Dr. Kim Richardson. And Kim's conversation was about coaching in uncertain times. She had great things to share. She created this course. You may want to even reach out to her to see how she did what she did and do something similar. She said the team built a real sense of community. And I'll just give you one example. She talked about Martin Seligman's idea that when we experience a negative experience, how we respond is really critical. And what Seligman says is that let's say you have a teacher and she does a lesson and the lesson bombs. It's just clearly it didn't work out. Well, if the teacher thinks that all of her classes bomb, and it always is like that, and it's her fault, she's going to be really bummed out by that experience. And it could ultimately, that way of looking at life could lead to a sort of a depressing perspective on things. And the three words there are pervasive. She thinks every class bombs, permanent, and there's nothing she can do about it, and personal, and it's her fault. On the other hand, if the teacher has a class and it bombs, and she said, well, that one bombed, but a lot of my other ones are going pretty well. And it's not permanent. I can learn more. I can talk. I have a coach I can work with. There's a lot of things I can do to get better at this. I'm not stuck with this situation. Besides which, I was trying out a new strategy. It didn't work that well. So maybe I can do something about that. So that's the idea. Not to take it personally, not to see it as permanent or pervasive. That's just one of the things. She had a ton of good things to say. Next question. Can you share resources that teachers can use for virtual learning to ramp up our online classes? So the first thing is they work this, and some of you are probably involved in this, but I worked with a wonderful group of people. I didn't do the work. I just sort of showed up in awe to watch what these amazing people could do because they cared about others. They just worked for free for an hour or two every Thursday and created an instructional playbook for distance learning. So there are some commercial distance learning playbooks, but this one's free. And I'll just give you the website. You won't remember all this, but as you look through, if you type in distance learning playbook, it's going to take you till the next second page because you'll see lots of commercial ones. But it starts out sites.google.com/esc16.net, and then this distance learning playbook home. So, but I think if you just Google, it's hard to remember. And unfortunately, I can't access your chat to put that all in there. But we'll make sure it's available at the end of this video when it's recorded. But if you just Google distance learning playbook and you wait for one that says sites, google.com/ESC16, you can find it. And it's packed. There are 20 different strategies. The group came together and they identified 100 resources that you could use. Then they narrowed it down to the 20 most powerful. And then those 20 most powerful, they created one-page descriptions and checklists that teachers can use. So it's packed with useful resources. Second thing is you may want to look up a website, schoolvirtually.org. And there's a person I interviewed, Sean Smith, Dr. Sean Smith at University of Kansas. And Sean created this website. There's a whole section for teachers. There's a whole section for parents. And it's packed with resources. And so those are two things that I would say that are worth looking at. There are many other things too. If you just Google distance learning resources, there are a ton of things. But two that I would say are really high powerful are those ones. The distance learning playbook that's free and schoolvirtually.org. I haven't read Fisher, Fry, and Hattie's playbook, but I really respect their work. I'm sure it's a really valuable tool. But it's not mine, but the one that this group of 70 people created, the beauty of it is it's free. You can share it with teachers. You can send people the links. Everything's accessible. All right. I got a question here. So how can we differentiate educational coaching and instructional coaching? Okay, from Tanaya Karina Melissa. I'm not sure about educational coaching, how we would define it, but I would say instructional coaching, as I define it, is first off a partnership between a teacher and a coach. And so the teacher makes a lot of decisions about what happens. And the coach helps the teacher get a clear picture of current reality. In this case, it's probably for virtual situations, it's probably going to be by watching a video of your lesson. That's how I did it when I was coached. So just record if you're using Zoom as your platform, just record the lesson or however you do it. Then setting a goal, and we'll talk about the kind of goal, a peer's goal, that's what I call it. And then identifying strategies to help the person hit the goal. And then partnering with the teacher to make adaptations until the goal gets hit. So simple example would be mine. I watched the video of my lesson. My coach asked me questions. I identified a goal. My goal was I wanted to use more, I wanted a level of engagement measured by a Likert scale that we gave to the participants twice during the session. My strategy was to create a run sheet that laid out exactly what was going to happen every so many minutes, and then make sure that, and then vary the kind of learning people did. So sometimes they were watching a video, sometimes they were in small groups, sometimes they had quiet reflection, sometimes I was telling stories. And then I met again with my coach, and she helped me think it through and come up with some other ideas. Sometimes what the coach does is describes and models the practice, but that's instructional coaching. Educational coaching, I think, could well be instructional coaching. It's probably the main way it happens. But it could be, I suppose, curriculum coaching or any number of different approaches. And so that's the thing. You may want to look up a thing I wrote on, if you just Google Jim Knight, dialogical, facilitative, directive coaching, it just sort of gives you a picture of different kinds of coaching. That would be a resource to look at. Okay. This might be another definition. How much is too much teacher feedback when coaching in a virtual environment? It's like going to a buffet and overfilling your plate. So, and we already saw in self-care, we shouldn't be doing that. So first off, I haven't got the right words for this, but I've been trying to articulate this, like get it clear in my head on how to describe it. But there are essentially, for lack of better terms, one way of thinking about feedback is there are two kinds of feedback. There's self-generated reflective feedback and imposed feedback. And there's probably some blurring of the lines. But self-generated reflective feedback is where the teacher has some kind of mechanism for analyzing their video, for example, or looking at student work, and they reflect on what's working and what's not working, and they come to their own conclusions. And imposed feedback is where maybe we show up with a checklist and we sit down with the teacher and we say, let me tell you my grows and glows, and here are the things I liked and here are the things I didn't like, and you should do this. Now, I wrote a column for Radical Learners where I referenced Marcus Buckingham's column in Harvard Business Review about feedback. And to cut to the chase, he says the second kind of feedback nobody likes. Now, if I'm trying to improve my running, which I'm not a runner right now, but I hope to be soon, but I would want imposed, for lack of better terms, imposed feedback. I would like the coach to say to me, or my trainer to say to me, you need to lean forward a little bit more, and you need to stand up straighter, and give me specifics on how to do it. But in something as complex as the classroom, or it's like parenting, someone said, can I give you a few pointers on how you could be a better parent? Most of us wouldn't say, that's what I'm waiting for. Yes, please bring it on. No, we would say, like, who are you to do that? And when that happens, when we are given that question, if you want some feedback, often what happens is we go into flight or fright mode, or whatever that phrase is. We don't want to hear it. We don't embrace it. We get into survival mode. That's what Marcus Buckingham says. And so that's what we found too. So I think it's better to set up self-generated feedback where people are able to analyze their own video and see what's there. If they come to us, even if they come to us and ask us for specific feedback, Sharon Thomas, for example, who's a consultant who works with us, and she's just a rock star. But she and I talked about the fact that she asked for feedback and I didn't want to give her the feedback. And then when I gave her the feedback, it was still kind of awkward, even though she really wanted me to give it. It's a complex thing. But when the person looks at their video and they go, I can't believe I wasted 30% of that class on just transitioning from one activity to the next, I really want to focus in on what happens. Or if it's virtually, I can't believe how much of what I did looked pretty unengaging. Or I can't believe how much time was wasted, or I don't have a sense of how the kids are learning or how engaged they are. When you watch the film and you figure it out for yourself, it's a lot more powerful than when people give it to you. So that's the first thing. I think you want to give feedback that's self-generated. Second thing is how much feedback, which is the real question. And I think that depends on that the person has set a goal. And so the feedback should be helping the person achieve a goal. Ideally, self-generated feedback. We talk about peers' goals. We found that SMART goals had some limitations. So not that you should get rid of SMART goals, but you can sort of make them peers' goals at the same time. So peers' goals are powerful. That is, they're going to make a big difference in kids' lives. Easy, which means it's going to be difficult. We're talking about a classroom, either virtual or face-to-face. We're talking about a classroom. You're going to have your productive struggle. But let's figure out the easiest way to accomplish the goal. Because the more easy it is, the more likely people will do it. Thirdly, it should matter to the teacher. It's an emotionally compelling goal. It's reachable, which is to say we have a clearly articulated definition and a strategy to help us hit the goal. Definition of what the destination is, what the goal is. And a student-focused versus a teacher-focused goal. We just found that if you have a student-focused goal, you have to stick with it until you get there. And I want to emphasize a couple things. It needs to make a difference for kids. Otherwise, why do it? That's the powerful part. And then emotionally compelling. People will say, well, shouldn't the teachers just do the goal that the principal gives them? Shouldn't they do the goal that I think they should do? And if you have a powerful goal, which is going to do more good for kids? A goal that comes from the outside, because the research says we're not too excited about doing other people's goals. Or a goal where the teacher says, if we could hit this thing, that would really matter to me. I'm all in for that goal. So long as it's powerful, I would want the goal that the teacher picks that they're passionate about hitting. If they pick a crazy goal, we don't have to silence ourselves. We can say, do you mind if I share something? One thing I found is if you don't establish sort of behavioral expectations before cooperative learning, it doesn't work. So I wonder if we should do that first before we do cooperative learning. What do you think? We don't tell them what to do, but at the same time, we don't sit there like a lump. We share our ideas, but we always position the teacher as a decision maker. So to cut to the chase, the feedback should be, whenever possible, self-generated, and the feedback should be in pursuit of a goal. We have a goal we're trying to hit, and that's how we're going to get there. It should make a real difference for kids. And if we haven't clearly articulated a goal, it's probably not going to happen. Heath and Heath say resistance sometimes is just lack of clarity. So we want to get that kind of clarity. Next question, and we have a couple more. How can we help teachers dealing with their own trauma from last spring? I've had so many teachers cry or nearly come to tears when talking about it. How can we get focused on next month when the effects of last spring are still so strongly felt? So I'm not an expert on trauma. I don't know. I'm hesitant to say more than just a few general statements about this, except that I recognize we have to think about it because trauma often is invisible, and we might be dealing with it and not even be aware of it. And we're worried about our friends, and we're worried about our family, and we're worried about our health, and we're worried about the even worse things, job loss, even sickness, and all the horrors that could come with that. And so people are dealing with a lot, and it comes out in difficult ways. So someone might just tear into you and be really angry, and you're like, man, I've never seen that person do that before. And really what's driving it is all of the things we're dealing with respect to this time. Whether it's short trauma from a certain event or just the general traumatic experiences we're dealing with, the three things I mentioned before. And so I think the first thing is, if someone comes to us and their behavior is out of sync with what we're used to seeing, it's not you that's the problem. And it's also not that person. That person's dealing with a lot. They're worried about their livelihood in some cases. They're worried about all kinds of things, and that keeps them awake at night. And so we have to separate the challenging behaviors that arise because of this from that person and also from us. They're not attacking us. We just happen to be the ones that are the receptacles of this stuff. I think it's really important to be there for people as best we can, because we're dealing with stuff too. So, but to listen and to demonstrate empathy in the way I talked about. And sometimes in order to demonstrate empathy, we have to ask ourselves, what is stopping me from empathizing with this person? It's often fear of being wrong, fear of the unknown. If we can become aware of our fear, we can move beyond it, and we can empathize, and through empathy, we can genuinely connect with people. This is this thing that Marshall Rosenberg talks about in nonviolent communication, is that we turn people into stereotypes and we dehumanize them by just saying, oh, he's this, or she's that, or they're only saying that because of this reason. And then we don't have to deal with the actual person because we've checked off a box and they're that stereotype. But if we really want to be there for people, we have to get beyond our own fears and really, really hear who they really are. I think it's important to recognize that you're a coach and not a therapist. And so you can demonstrate empathy, and you can acknowledge what they're going through, and you can listen. But you need to let go of the need to solve their problem. This is my opinion, and it could well be that the experts on trauma would say something different. But so you need to look up more about this. But to my mind, people don't really want you to solve their problem. They probably wouldn't like your solution anyway. What they want you to do is tell them they're going to be okay, or at least tell them they are okay, and that you're with them and you hear them and you understand them. Just let them talk. sometimes that's hard because emotion affects us the way of, I was going to say a virus. Their emotion gets inside of us. So if someone comes to us with an awful lot of stress, we can start to feel stressed. And we don't want to feel that stress. We're like, I got enough stress already. I don't need yours too. And we sometimes try to solve their problem just to get rid of the stress because we don't want to feel it. But if we really want to be there for people, we have to let it go. Have what John Gottman calls a stress-reducing conversation. I mean, a simple question would be, what would I want from someone if I was in that situation, and how can I do that? And I think there are many, many resources out there, but one I found is called thiswayup.org.au. So it comes from Australia. And then the rest of it is, how do you feel traumatized? But thiswayup.org.au has a lot of good stuff around mental health and trauma. And so I would recommend that site as a useful tool. I mentioned this a few times, but the other resource that's available is radicallearners.com and our website, instructionalcoaching.com. I'm going to say one more thing, and then I want to talk about the next couple of conversations that are coming up. That is that you may be feeling, I just interviewed actually, I looked at the video. The coaching conversation took place in April, but was watching this coach, and she was saying, I want to be valuable for my team. I want to be valuable for my school. And I'm really questioning what I am doing, and is it of any value? And first off, practically, there'll never be a time where you can be more valuable than right now. People are dealing with so much stuff and so much uncertainty. If you can help them plan their lessons and organize what happens online and offline, and be like, a lot of your time is going to be spent just searching through, finding what's this tool I can use, and what's on the distance learning playbook, and sharing that. You can be a huge, huge help. Practically, you're going to be a help. But I want to talk about the power of coaching, why it is so great if you're a coach that you've chosen to be a coach. Because I think coaching, it addresses the most important things in life. If you choose to be a coach, it's almost inevitable that you're going to become a better communicator. And I've heard, and I found this in the interviews we did for this upcoming book, that people say they're better friends, they're better parents, they're better spouses because of their work as a coach, because their coaching has taught them to be listeners, taught them to be non-judgmental, taught them to see deeper into what's going on with respect to empathy and so forth. But coaches also engage in relationships with other people, and they teach other people how to have better relationships. So one of the things that coaching is all about is fostering better conversations, building up relationships. And if you were to make a list of 5 things in life that are critical, one of them's got to be relationships. The second thing is learning. What coaches do, in part because of the non-judgmental and partnership approach they take, and also because they have a process that's efficient, whether it's the impact cycle or something else. What they do is they help people learn. They are a second set of hands, a second set of eyes, but also there are people who help people structure their own learning. They help people learn more, and learning is critical to a fulfilling life. I believe when we take a top-down, I'm going to tell you what to do, I'm going to watch you, I'm going to hold you accountable kind of approach, sucks the life right out of you. But teachers are really resilient, and they really believe in learning. And when teachers are treated with respect, and when their voices are heard, and they're given an efficient process so they can take on the challenges of the classroom and do what they want to do, they will blow you away. And as a coach, you can do the latter. You can help teachers really become excited and unleash their brilliance, so to speak. And finally, As a coach, a third thing is I think you help people reconnect with their purpose. Um, Again, you take a top 5 list of what matters in life. Um, Purpose is really important. Um, Learning is really important. Relationships are really important, but purpose is right up there. If you don't understand the purpose behind what you're doing, as Simon Sinek says, start with why. Uh, you're going to have a hard time getting excited, and you need to be clear on why you get up in the morning. What's the purpose behind what you do? And coaches help people get clear on their purpose and help them be reconnected with their purpose because they're learning and because they're engaged in relationships. I should mention that Unleashing Your Brilliance idea I got from Kristen Anderson, and I hope to interview her soon too. So she's another person who's going to be at our Teaching, Learning, Coaching conference. So to me, coaching addresses the big things in life: purpose, learning, and relationships. And so it's really, really, really important. Okay, just a couple things about what's coming up. I'm excited about all of the conversations in the next few weeks. And I just feel really fortunate to be able to learn from all these people. Next week, Wendy Reinke and Keith Herman are going to talk with me about motivational interviewing and coaching. In my life, motivational interviewing is one of the most important things I've learned about. I learned about it through those two. First, Wendy introduced me to Keith's work, and the two of them have written some books about motivational interviewing in schools that haven't got enough play in my mind, because I think it's some of the most important things for coaches to know, because it really explains the nature of understanding resistance and how we interact with other people, and the partnership approach. And so that's next week. And we're going to talk about motivational interviewing and coaching, which they're the world's leading experts on the topic. Then on the next week, the 27th, I'm going to talk with Floyd Cobb and John Crownapple about their work on looking at belonging and dignity in schools, and in particular, how their ideas about belonging and dignity apply in this time where there is this awakening and awareness of racial injustice. And how do we create schools where all children feel they belong? And their work is incredibly powerful. If you just go on to Amazon and look up their book and look at the comments, you'll see how much their work has changed people's lives. And then the following week, I'm going to talk to some of my favorite people and talk about presentations. I'm going to have 3 people talk about what it looks like to do a good presentation. 3 of my all-time favorite presenters. So that's the next few weeks. That's what's going to happen. And we're also going to be, after that, talking to people who are coming to the Teaching, Learning, Coaching conference. I have an incredible group of people we're going to interview. So thank you for checking in, and thank you for all you do. And hope you have a great day. But more importantly, I hope this year is the best it could possibly be. Thanks.